Good morning. I am Dr. Nsenga Burton. I am the editor, cultural editor of National Newspaper Association and Black Press USA. And today we are honored to have Dr. David A. Thomas, the 12th president at Morehouse College, here as part of our second interview as part of our HBCU series this summer. How are you, Dr. Thomas?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me on the show.
Thank you for coming. Welcome. So we've been very excited because we have really focused on really bringing or giving our platform or using our platform to highlight and elevate the voices of HBCUs in the country. Morehouse is an illustrious organization. Many people know you. You are a name brand, a household name. In fact, so we're just very happy to have you with us today. So without further ado, we're just going to jump into it and have this conversation. Okay. So tell me, give me the good news. What good things, great things are happening at Morehouse College?
Okay. My communications VP is going to jump out of his chair, but because it's you and Nsenga, I'm going to give you the hottest news flash at Morehouse College.
Okay. Yes. We love breaking news at NMPA Black Press USA. Come on, let's give it to it.
Okay. I can't give you any names, but we will soon be receiving an 8-figure gift to support scholarships at Morehouse College.
Yes. Congratulations.
Also, just in the last 10 days, a group of students who I taught in 1993 at the Harvard Business School, who've been watching what's been happening in the world, what we're doing in Morehouse College, have committed to give us a 7-figure gift.
Excellent.
And they've already raised half of that. There's momentum at Morehouse. We have launched a program to increase the number of Black men going to be teachers and educators.
Excellent.
And have gotten support for that from a donor. We've just finished completing the payoff of the debt that Robert Smith committed to. And we've also launched the first coding boot camp led by a historically Black college. It's a joint venture with Morehouse, a group called Momentum Learning in North Carolina, and OHUB, which is run by Rodney Sampson.
I know Rodney.
And we have roughly 30 students enrolled right now. We're also going to run it again in the fall, and that's really about preparing our citizens to take advantage of where the economy is going to grow in the 21st century, which is in technology and data sciences. We've launched a data analytics institute with the other colleges here in the Atlanta University Center. So there's a lot. There are many things happening here, and our efforts in entrepreneurship and innovation are growing by leaps and bounds. And then the things that have always happened at Morehouse College continue to happen. We just graduated a class. Our students are headed to some of the best graduate schools in the world, and some of the marquee companies. And even more impressive to me is the number of our students who are actually starting their own businesses, which they started from their dorm rooms here on our campus. So
that's fantastic. Yeah, all of that is fantastic. Maybe I should ask you, what aren't you doing at Morehouse? Those are wonderful things that are happening. Wonderful things that are happening at Morehouse, and I know that you're proud of your students and your faculty and staff as well. So when we think about Morehouse, we think about leadership, we think about entrepreneurs, we think about the only school that services African American men exclusively. Tell me about, and Morehouse as well is a storied institution for many reasons. Not one of which is also its role in the civil rights movement and things of that nature. But tell me what it was like when such a great institution, and so many others, in the AUC as well, throughout the country, were humbled kind of by this COVID, when COVID impacted or when COVID hit. What did that do to your institution?
Well, what COVID did to us, we put our students first. We were one of the first institutions in the country to announce that we would evacuate. So within less than 2 weeks, we evacuated our campus and took our entire curriculum online. What that meant for us was that we had to forego the substantial revenue that the school receives for room and board. And that's a huge financial hit for a small college like Morehouse. We cast a much longer shadow than our size would suggest. We're only 2,200 students. We don't have graduate programs, and we're 75% residential. 75% of our students live on campus. So when we don't have income from room and board, that's a huge financial hit to us. Forced us to make some very hard decisions as well about our staff, who are amazingly dedicated to this institution. There's a good side to it. We took our entire curriculum online, which the college had talked about being much more present with online distance education for the last 15 years, but never sort of had the incentive to go there, if you will. And we've gone there very successfully. And as a result, our summer school this year is more subscribed than it was last year.
Oh, wow.
Part of that is we made it easier for students to take summer school classes. The good news there is those students will stay on track to graduate. And we also think developing this capability of online education will also allow Morehouse to make more of our programs available to non-traditional Morehouse students, meaning people who aren't between the ages of 17 and 23 and who are not male. Our traditional audience centered around Black men. 95% of our students identify as being Black men. So there have been some good things that have come out of it, but it's definitely, had an impact on us. I'm here right now in my office. And if anybody follows me on Twitter, more than once I've written about missing my men. When I walk this campus, my energy comes from what I refer to as my men, students.
So what are the ways, speaking of your students, some of the ways in which you are supporting your students who, and the semester has ended, but during the semester and I'm imagining this will be happening also during the summer, what are some of the ways that you have been supporting students who may or may not have access to the same levels of technology required to do these online courses, or maybe dealing with some issues at home? COVID is impacting Black families in an alarming way. What are you doing to help support those students?
Great question. From our alumni community and friends, we launched an emergency fund, and within a matter of 2 weeks, we had raised over $250,000. Some of our students were going to be homeless. We actually bought out a hotel and provided those students a stipend as well as breakfast and dinner. We've also sent out more than, I think, 50 laptops to students who got home and realized that they didn't have connectivity. We've sent hotspots to students who are in areas of the country where, quite frankly, wireless internet and all the things that we take for granted here in Atlanta are not easy to access. We also began to realize that many of our students were also having some mental health challenges.
Mm-hmm.
And we instituted 3 programs. We had something called Meditation on Tuesday, which was a spiritually oriented program students could dial into at, I think it was 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning. We have something called Crown Forum that we do here at Morehouse College. We took it online.
Mm.
And that's where we bring in speakers to talk to our students about issues related to the themes of Morehouse, right? Leadership, service, preparing yourself to do your best. And we instituted something on Wednesday evenings called Morehouse Notes. And for example, we brought in a number of people to talk to our students about how you manage stress and trauma. As we were hearing from students that they were losing relatives. I only know of one student who was seriously affected from a health perspective by COVID, and I talked to him last week. He's fine, but we've had several students whose families have been impacted, and we've reached out to them. We also launched a program where staff members called students just to see how they were doing. And we were able to contact over half of our students with just a wellness check. And in many cases, parents got on the phone. You know, I think that has sent a message that Morehouse cares. And we also have learned, so we entered into a partnership with Microsoft so that for the class that enters in the fall, we will give Surface 2-in-1 devices to every student.
Oh, that's amazing.
So that if we have to evacuate, every student in our freshman class will have the ability to be connected. And we're working at securing more resources, you know, for other students of ours who are upperclassmen who might have the same need.
That's excellent. I don't even think that model is out yet. I think they're launching that. Is that new? Are they launching it with you?
That's new. We just
Surface?
announced it. So you're breaking news here.
Again, NNPA, Black Press USA, breaking news. Yes. I was like, yes, I haven't seen that. All right. Sonia Lawson Hutchinson says her son received a wellness call, was much appreciated. So she wanted to pass that along to you.
Thank you,
Yes. And we've actually had a panel maybe 2 weeks ago on mental health and COVID and really lots of different populations. We obviously talked about students because everybody on it was a professor at the other 2 people were professors at Clark Atlanta, and then me, of course. And we talked about the isolation and some of the other things that happen with students. So that's amazing and wonderful that you have all of that in place for students because they really need it. You mentioned the fall, you know, maybe you'll have to evacuate, maybe you won't. What's happening? Like, are you coming back in person in the fall? Are you still going to be mostly 100% remote? Is it going to be a hybrid? Tell us what you're doing.
We're planning around 3 scenarios, and we haven't decided which one yet. One is that we will be residential. The second is that we'll be residential, but in a hybrid format. That probably has the highest likelihood, which is we will be much less dense residentially. So we probably, of the 1,500 students who usually occupy residence on our campus, will probably be about half of that, so that every student has their own room. and we have space available if we have to quarantine.
Okay.
And we'll have classes where faculty will likely have the option to teach either in person or online. And again, we have to think about the health and safety of our faculty as well as our students. And many of our faculty are like me. Our average age is about 58.
Mm-hmm.
And anything you read says that that group is, at more risk
Yes.
if they get the virus. So likely we'll be in a hybrid format. And the other is that we'll be totally virtual. And I plan to make that decision by the end of June. That's what I promised our community. We think that will give students and parents enough time to plan, to be here or to be remote. And we're lucky because we have the Morehouse School of Medicine.
Yes.
And they are taking the lead in helping design a set of protocols that would include testing, monitoring, social tracing, that might allow the Atlanta University Center to actually be a center of excellence in how you open up a university and college campus.
Yeah, that's awesome. Because you have you can model that, and Morehouse School of Medicine is an outstanding institution, and is leading the way, and working closely with other institutions to find a vaccine, to have a cure, and to develop these protocols. So that's fantastic.
Exactly. So as well as epidemiological expertise.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, a lot of their faculty have been featured on news shows, including this one. So we love Morehouse School of Medicine as well. So what have you learned? Like, what's your biggest lesson from COVID? I mean, you've been in the game a long time. You've worked in different in all levels of academia. Now you are president of this illustrious institution. What have you learned from COVID?
Well, here's where it may sound like I'm giving the Morehouse commercial. Because one of the things I've learned, and I wrote this both to our entire community, but also to our students in 2 letters. What I've learned is the world needs Morehouse now than it ever did. And, you've asked me about COVID, but we're really in a moment where 2 viruses of pandemic proportions that are epidemic in our country are showing us how the very things that Morehouse has stood for and that we've provided leadership to address are as important now as they were in the last century. And those 2 viruses are the COVID-19 virus and the virus of institutionalized racism and white superiority in our society. If you think about what Morehouse stands for, the idea that Black male excellence should be an expectation, not an exception, right? Lots of places can produce Black men who are excellent at what they do, but everybody acts like it's an exception. Like, wow. Morehouse, that's the expectation. Imagine a world where that was the expectation. Here, our young men are taught to not only be excellent, but to lead and serve with a moral and ethical compass. That's the world needs that. And they need the kind of expertise that our faculty have en masse. You go to a lot of places and they have the Black Studies department.
Right.
Faculty who know something about Black people.
Right. Right.
Doesn't matter what you call the department at Morehouse, faculty know about how that connects to the Black experience. Whether it's English and a professor's teaching Shakespeare,
Right.
or whether it's economics and a professor is teaching monetary theory.
Right.
Not to mention, cultural history and those things that you can easily find at Afro-American studies departments at any college in the country.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So you bring up something that is really important. I mean, I would like for you to discuss Morehouse's legacy of civil rights leadership, but also, and then after that, I think we'll talk about what happened with one of your students and a young woman from Spelman that has been national news, because we absolutely have to talk about that. But talk a little bit about Morehouse College's place in civil rights history and its role in fighting white supremacy. Institutionalized racism over the centuries.
And I have to say I'm enjoying this interview because you're giving me time to really talk about things that matter to me. Mm-hmm. Morehouse College is 153 years old. It's started in Augusta, Georgia, moved to Atlanta roughly 5 years after the Civil War ended, all dedicated to the education of Black men. And Morehouse College was one of the first colleges that took the stance that we're educating individuals to go out and lead in society, not just Black people, but all people. And that it was important that they be critical thinkers. And there's a debate that happened between W.B. Du Bois and Booker T. Washington, who was focused on vocational education. Du Bois was focused on developing this Black intelligentsia. But the only president of a Black college at that time who stood up and said Du Bois is right was John Hope. Mm-hmm. And that set us on a path of developing critical thinkers with an orientation to lead and to serve. Martin Luther King came to Morehouse College. And by that point in time, we had also developed a number of individuals who became great voices in the theological community and the civil rights community, including our president, Benjamin Mays. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so, the story about that many people here will say about Martin Luther King is that without Morehouse, there would have been no King. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. As opposed to King made Morehouse.
Right.
Right. Mm-hmm. And we've gone on to do that, in every, I think we've done everything but produce a president of the United States. And I've got a bunch of guys on this campus who think it's their time. And, yes. And right up to this moment, I was with a group of my students 2 weeks ago who were organizing and leading the protest here in Atlanta. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I went up to the launching place to support them, and they asked me if I was going, and I said, no, it's your time.
Yes.
I'll be here when you get back. Here to wish you well, send you out. Mm-hmm. But this is the time that Morehouse was made for.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and it's interesting that you said that you sent them on their way, so to speak, but you were also there when one of your students and a Messiah Young and a Spelman student, Tanaya Pilgrim, were videotaped. Luckily, people had cameras. Being attacked by or I should say allegedly attacked. We don't want to get sued now, do we? Allegedly attacked uh, by APD members who have subsequently been fired. They have launched a suit of their own, saying that they were responding within their rights. But they broke out the windows of the students' cars. They surrounded them. They tased them. They detained them. The young woman said that one of the officers who was walking her to the police car, threatened to kill them. All of that happened here during the protests.
Yeah.
And then we saw them at their press conferences because Morehouse and, of course, the large African American community rallied around them to get their story told. Can you talk about your role in that?
My role in that was I think it's much more not just my role, but Morehouse's role, because quite frankly, some members of my team, my leadership team, learned about it before I did. I woke up to it the next morning, but members of my team had heard about it that night, mobilized with lightning speed to connect with Morehouse alumni in the legal community. We were quickly in touch with the chief of police and the mayor's office, and getting Messiah released from custody, as well as influencing the charges against him being dropped. I was in conversation with the mayor, within hours of it happening and waking up that morning. And then I spent time with Messiah and his father. And I think the thing I was most honored by was after that discussion, I went back to my house and I got a call midday that said that his family wanted to have the press conference in front of Morehouse. And I hope that reflects his sense of this as a safe place.
Yes. And I think even during the press conference that I watched, he noted that he had the full support of Morehouse and that you all had really worked hard on his behalf, along with his dad, to get him get the charges dropped and things of that nature. So, Morehouse, I think HBCUs in general, but Morehouse specifically, are places where you go beyond just the institution. Like, you look at the individual, their role in society, and you connect with your students and really nurture and guide them in ways that obviously happen in the classroom, but also outside of the classroom. And it's not, necessarily because, there's a program for it. It's just the expectation that if you attend an HBCU, specifically in Morehouse specifically, and HBCUs in general, that is the type of leadership, attention, support, and guidance that students can expect.
I think that's absolutely right. And I can only speak for Morehouse. That's part of the culture here. I think it's been interesting to me because I've gotten notes from some of my students thanking me for being very public in my support of what they're doing. And each time I'm surprised because I couldn't imagine not being there in that way, because that's what Morehouse presidents, Morehouse faculty, Morehouse staff have been for 153 years. Is here supporting and standing up these young men.
So we have, I just want to give you a couple of the comments. Trisha Young said her son was a rising sophomore. He received a wellness call from Morehouse. We have David Youngblood, who's been checking in and saying good morning and talking about the expertise that that Morehouse gives in helping people to grow up Black. I would love for you to address that. Like, what does that mean? And then, of course, Denise McGee said good morning. But in terms of, raising up people to grow up black? What does that mean to you? I'm gonna turn it into a question, David.
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and my question, my answer, and I have to say, you've got me just telling my truth as opposed to thinking, like what's the right soundbite? Because my philosophy is not that I am preparing them to grow up black. I am preparing them to grow up and be men, know how to embrace their unique gifts, and to see being black as a gift. And that's one of the gifts that if they embrace it, it actually makes them more powerful in the world. But to embrace it, they've got to get by a lot of the stereotypes and dehumanization that creates George Floyd. Right? And Ahmaud Arbery.
Those incidents, yes.
Right? So you've got to learn to walk in the world embracing who you are and not seeing that as a threat to your success.
Right.
And what you can do in the world. So I'm raising them to be men. I'm not raising them to be black.
Okay. Got you. So in terms of the social justice and the students who are involved and they are at the leadership, they're at the table, and alums as well, and faculty, and staff, have been part of all of these uprisings. I like to call them protest uprisings, if you will, that have been taking place everywhere throughout the country, throughout the world. But can you talk about the ways in which you all work with students who are interested in pursuing that type of, I would call grassroots activism, at least at that age.
Yeah.
And then ultimately they'll become probably community organizers and maybe president, as one of your students.
Right.
Yes, yes. But what do you have in place to help them develop that kind of gene?
It's very holistic, Nsenga. It starts, if you've never been, I invite the world to come to our new student orientation. Okay. The first night and the night that's called the parents' parting ceremony. The introduction to Morehouse. It's organized by the students for the new students. It conveys who we are. And then it moves into the classroom. And we have a saying here called iron sharpens iron, which means that by these young men, if you will, bumping up against each other, challenging each other, they start to develop their own agendas for how they're going to change the world. And then we have faculty who are committed to social justice, and it doesn't matter what they're teaching.
Yes.
So students get mentors. And then we have alum who are in every field a student would want to go into, who connect to and mentor our students. A great example is what our alumni here in Atlanta who are doctors do. They have a mentoring program, and what our students see is these doctors using their voice as doctors to make a social difference.
Yes.
And the same is true for our program that prepares students who want to go be lawyers.
Right.
Yeah.
So David Youngblood says challenging each other, yes, believing in themselves. People are over here preaching in the comments, Dr. Thomas. Amen. Thank you, Dr. Thomas. Yes, sir. To be strong black men. Trisha Young said the amen. Soyini Abdul Mateen said, yes, sir, to be strong black men. So what you are saying is resonating with your readers and with your alums and all of those folks. What advice do you give students who want to become involved in social justice? I mean, like, so the situation with Messiah, like, you can't control how other people respond to you, but what do you tell them in terms of what they can control when they pursue these types of avenues?
I tell them that their power will come from a number of things. Their ability to exercise and willingness to exercise their voice. Their conscious use of the tools that have been made available to them because of the struggle of others. And I start with the vote. So I sent a letter out to our community and said that my goal is to have 100% of Morehouse students who are eligible and alumni vote in the next election. Also, leveraging our right to organize in nonviolent ways around the issues that we think are important to bring to consciousness in this country and to influence the legislative agenda of those who who are elected. And the last thing I tell them is your voice and the power to exercise your voice will be dependent on how excellent you are in whatever field of endeavor you pursue. So you take, for example, some of the people who've had the most influence in moving the Black community forward have been athletes and entertainers. Why? Because they were excellent. That's why Oprah Winfrey has a voice.
Yes.
Like Colin Kaepernick had a voice. Right? You know, I'm 64 years old. I remember the guys standing on the platform at the 1968 Olympics with their fist up in the air because they had won.
Yes.
Right? If they had come in 10th, nobody would have noticed.
Right.
But they had won.
Yes.
So what I tell them is, I don't care what you want to go be. Entertainer, lawyer, doctor, right? Be excellent, because then you have a voice.
Yes. Yes. Be excellent, because then you have a voice. We need that on a t-shirt.
You're not excellent.
Yes.
And you're a Black man, you don't have a voice.
Yes. Yes. And and definitely Black men, Black women, excellence is key, you know, and I love that. That's what you said about expectations. You know, expecting greatness is where it starts, you know, because other people, and I try to tell this to my nephew, who, you know, may or may not be going to Morehouse soon. He's a sophomore in high school. But one of the things I tell him is that
we like to start sending out our advertisements around sophomore year.
Yes, I will definitely. I'll text it to you. But what I really want is this idea of I'm telling him that other people, you can't allow other people to set your expectations, because other people, based on how they see Black people, have different expectations of us. So you have to establish your own expectations, because somebody else might let you be a C student or let you show up halfway to your at your he plays football, at your game or what have you, because that's all they think Black people can do. So you have to set your own expectation for yourself, because other people are very happy with just letting Black folks be average and below average and not meeting our potential, or moving us away from that purposely, moving us away or turning us around from it.
Dr. Burton, you know that you're quoting from a chapter in a book I wrote.
Yes, I was going to bring that up. Would you like to share? I do my research. I do my research.
Well, I wrote a book.
The name of the book, yes.
Breaking Through, the Making of Minority Executives in Corporate America.
Yes.
And in it, there's a chapter that talks about what are the characteristics that you can see in people of color, Black people, when they're early in their careers, that correspond with them being able to break through the glass ceiling to be, some of the people I studied became CEOs and CFOs and heads of Fortune 500 companies. And one of them was what I call internalized standards of excellence,
Yes.
which means it doesn't matter if you show up and somebody says to you, well, it's okay. We just expect for you to be average. And you're looking around seeing other people who are well beyond average. That's your goal. Because you're focused on being excellent. Regardless of if anybody tells you it's okay for you to be mediocre, which is what happens in a lot of workplaces for African Americans. You're sitting with your boss. And the boss doesn't tell you, that's good, but here's what excellent looks like. They say, no, gee, Dr. Burton, you just exceeded my expectations. Well, if their expectations aren't high,
that's right.
That sounds like a compliment, but it's
that's
not.
Right. That's right.
Right. And that's about internalized excellence. And I think what happens to our young men here at Morehouse is there's something about being here that they internalize those expectations for themselves. And that's why, as a school that has never graduated more than 550 students in a single year, we've had an outsized impact on the world.
That is true. Yes. And having taught at Clark Atlanta, I will say honestly that Morehouse men carry themselves in a way that lets you know that they believe in themselves, right? They understand their role in the world. They understand what they should be doing as students, and that the world is bigger than Morehouse too, right? That they're being prepared to go and lead outside of the institution.
Right.
So I can honestly say that we have those kinds of discussions all the time in the Atlanta academic community, especially. So Yini Abdul Mateen says, Audre Lorde said, quote, if you don't define yourself for yourself, you will be crunched into other people's fantasies of you and eaten alive, unquote. And so that is, essentially, that is what Dr. Thomas is talking about, this whole notion of what happens. Another question I have for you, because Morehouse is Morehouse, we get a lot of information about you. And I love that you've been so transparent about all of the challenges that you face because of COVID and whatnot. We've also learned about, Robert Smith paying off the debt. I was there with you for the Oprah Winfrey. He hired me, y'all. He hired me to take, look, let's not get any rumors started. He hired me to produce a video on it with Oprah Winfrey when she gifted you $25 million. And a lot of that had to do with the way that the school is running and what's happening now and who you have in place and all of that wonderful thing. So in our minds, we have these ideas of great things that are happening in Morehouse. But I want to know, what's your favorite moment? Like, what's the best thing that has happened to you as president since you've been at Morehouse?
Wow. That's a great and hard question because there are so many moments to sort through. I think the best thing that happened was the first September that I was here. I spent several nights in the student dorm because they were the class that would be the first class that I saw through all 4 years of Morehouse. So we were freshmen together. And it created a connection for me with the students that I didn't expect. And that was the best thing,
And what was it about that? Like, was it the conversation? Was it just being in that energy? Like, what was it specifically about that?
It was the conversation. after, so one of the things that happens is on the first night that they're here, first full night, we do this welcome to the house that's organized by the students, part of new student orientation. It blows them away. And they start to talk about, you know, am I ready? Like, I'm part of something bigger than I thought. You know, and I just got a sense of what's on the minds, what's on their minds. And I asked them, does anybody have buyer's remorse? To a person, they said no, but a number of them said, I didn't know much about Morehouse. My parents wanted me to come to Morehouse, but now I get it. Right? You know, before the night, it was just the college I decided to go to.
Yes.
It could be anywhere, but now I know I'm somewhere.
Yes.
And, you know, that's just inspiring. Because there are a lot of things about being president of a small liberal arts college in today's times that don't put a smile on your face.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Deal with budgets. You know, most days nobody comes and tells you you're doing a great job. Everybody comes.
You're doing a great job, Dr. Thomas. I'm telling you today.
Yeah, but that, you know, but most days, you know, I don't think there's ever a day where somebody doesn't come to tell me, you know, either directly or indirectly, yeah, I thought you were a pretty smart guy, but you're getting this wrong. Right. But, you know, when you think back to those moments, when I think back to that experience, I'm like, okay, you know, this is the price of admission. And, you know, what I'm going to be able to see is worth that price of admission.
Well, yes, David Youngblood says, expect much. Jennifer Thomas says, this is true. My son called me 2 weeks after he got to Morehouse and said, y'all were right. He was happy and proud he picked Morehouse. We got Charles Hill Jr. who's saying hello. We have, you know, this is, I think, our last question. But I think it's a good one. And I get it. You know, we want to give people their flowers while we're here. Being in academia in general, and I mean, you know, this is me as a faculty person, administrator, can be thankless. So you have to really, it is a calling. That's why I tell people when they're like, oh, why don't you go do this? Or why don't you go do that? It's a calling. You absolutely have to want to do it, because there's no real reason why someone is as smart as PhDs are or can be would subject themselves to the cruelty that can be working in academia. But it's mostly because of the students, right? And what you want to do for the students.
Right.
But what are your hopes for the future of Morehouse College? I mean, it is esteemed, it is illustrious. You're doing amazing work now. All schools are having their challenges, and particularly small liberal arts colleges across the world, really, but certainly in the nation. What are your hopes and for the future of Morehouse College?
So let me capture it in just a few themes that are also themes that are in our strategic plan we're developing. One is fully realizing the excellence of Morehouse in our education of our young men. Setting the goal that every student we admit at Morehouse, we expect, and they should expect, to graduate from Morehouse unless they don't do the required work, but that they will not leave Morehouse because they can't afford to stay at Morehouse. They won't leave Morehouse because they didn't get good advising. Right? So realizing our excellence, that Morehouse will build partnerships of purpose with other organizations that allow us to do things we can't do by ourselves. So, for example, we've just launched a data analytics institute with the other schools in the Atlanta University Center. We couldn't do that by ourselves, but we can do that as a group. To elevate the mission of Morehouse by successfully launching and finishing a capital campaign of a minimum of $500 million so that we can ensure the affordability of Morehouse and that we can, create the campus of the 21st century at Morehouse.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The last theme is to see Morehouse move beyond its borders. We are on a 66-acre campus. We have 2,200 undergraduates. I think we can have a much bigger impact on the world.
Yes. And
that's being proven in this moment. You would have had me on regardless, but, I've been on CNBC and all kinds of other things in the last 2 weeks. I'll be on a live stream tomorrow. And that's all because in this moment, people want to hear the voice of Morehouse.
Yes.
Because we have moral authority on certain issues. And I think we have only touched the surface in terms of amplifying that voice and having more influence on the world. So Morehouse Beyond Borders.
Excellent. And one question, just to follow up, Beyond Borders, does that include study abroad programs? Because one of our readers wants to know about that.
Beyond Borders includes global.
Mm-hmm.
And us being global in every way possible, study abroad programs, joint ventures with colleges, being online and being able to offer courses to people in other countries.
Yes.
Right. So that's Beyond Borders. And my way of leading is I can think thematically, but the brilliance that will bring all those themes to life is other people in the organization. I just want to give the direction. And it's already happening. That's how our coding boot camp came up. You don't have to be a Morehouse student to be in that. There are men, women, older adults, current college students, all in that boot camp. And it's built off of the fact that we created a major in software engineering. And we just said, what in that set of skills can we disseminate into the world and create more value? On social justice, we've been working with the NFL and other pro sports leagues. Why? Because the energy that was created around Colin Kaepernick's protest, some folks started to say, how do we turn this into actual social action that makes a difference? Then they asked the question, who has the expertise? And it wasn't at any other places I used to work for. Georgetown, Penn. No, it was right here at Morehouse.
Yes.
So that's Morehouse Beyond Borders.
Yes. Well, on that note, I'd like to thank you. This was a wonderful conversation for joining us, Dr. Thomas. I think people learn a lot about you, about Morehouse and the wonderful things that are happening there. And of course, we wish you continued luck and success, especially dealing with COVID. We'll be watching you closely. And if you'd like to break news with us at the end of the month, when you decide what you're going to do before the fall, let me know that too. Next week, we're going to have Dr. Rosalind Artis on she's president of Benedict College. So thank you for agreeing to be part of the series, which is so important.
Well, let me just say, and you can tell Dr. Artis, I said it. I'm glad I came before her because she's fantastic, and I would have been bringing up the rear by a long shot.
So she's amazing.
That's going to be amazing. I'll dial in for that to get some tips.
Yeah, excellent. And we're going to end with Rochelle Jordan Davis, who says, "Thank you for your leadership. Our young men are fortunate."
Well, thank you. I'm
Yes.
fortunate.
Yes.
All right.
All right. Thank you for having us, and we
All
will
right.
see you next week. Bye.
Dr. Burton, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right.